Hello, my name is George Coleman. I worked for BT for 44 years, starting my career as an apprentice and finishing as a senior project manager. I'm now retired and fill my time by, amongst other things, volunteering as a STEM ambassador, mostly promoting engineering into schools. Today I'm going to talk to you about my apprenticeship. I will start by giving a little bit of background, what I was interested in at school and how I came to choose an apprenticeship. Then I'll talk about the first 3 years of my apprenticeship, an electrical apprenticeship. I'll move on and cover another bit of formal training that I did, which is sort of a slightly higher apprenticeship, which is the technical officer training. And I'll finalise by summarising and giving a few observations and my thoughts about apprenticeships. If I think back to my school days, I think I was probably always going to be better suited to an apprenticeship rather than going on to further education, A-levels and university. At school, I always enjoyed maths and sciences more than I did the other subjects and was better at those than I was the other subjects. Outside of school, I was always fairly practical, always used to repair the own punches on my bikes. I was bolting things on and off of them, making things, old pram wheels, making trolleys, etc. So was fairly practical. As far as the exams went, I did reasonably well at school. I got 6 O-levels, which included maths, science, maths, chemistry and physics, which were separate subjects in those days. It wasn't combined science. It did take me 2 attempts though, which meant I was slightly behind everybody else. And it was at that point that I felt it was better that I moved on to an apprenticeship. I actually applied for 3 apprenticeships. One was for a company called Matthew Hall, which was air conditioning. One for standard telephones and cables. We used to install a lot of telephone exchanges and that for BT, post offices was. And the last one was for BT, them post office telephones. Although interestingly, it wasn't to work on telephones, it was as a power engineer. So it was an apprenticeship for electrician, basically, dealing with electrical supplies to the telephone exchanges and the BT office buildings. I actually got all 3 jobs. Two of them were £11 a week, and the post office one was £17 a week, so that wasn't a difficult decision to decide to take the job for post office telephones, BT as was. And from now on, I'm just going to refer to it as BT. It's just that when I joined, it was post office telephones. I started my apprenticeship with BT on the 7th of August 1972. BT, in those days at least, offered a very comprehensive apprenticeship with all sorts of training and opportunities. In terms of technical college, the course that I studied there was the City and Guilds Electrical Technician Certificate. This was actually a 5-year course, although obviously only the first 3 would be covered on the apprenticeship. During my apprenticeship, BT sent us off to block release for that, so rather than going 1 day a week, we used to go for a 6-week period at a time. That can say continued for the whole 3 years of my apprenticeship. BT also had its own vocational training school in the City of London. In this we did both theoretical and practical work, had our own workshops, and we learnt there to do installation wiring. Once we'd installed it, faults were put on it, we were taught how to use meters, all the tools. Also, this is where all the health and safety was covered. BT was and is and always has been very hot on health and safety. So how to use the tools, use them properly, make sure everything's safe, etc., etc. That was also predominantly done on block release. We used to go along for courses. I think the first few were 6 weeks at a time. As the apprenticeship progressed, they became shorter, 2 or 3 weeks at a time. I think I did about half dozen of those, covering different things. There was also, of course, the field training. which is a fancy way of saying that I worked with people. What I found when I was working with people, that is, as long as you were interested and wanted to learn, people were very willing to teach you. Obviously covered electrical installation, because you have to put the equipment in first. Routine maintenance, where you're going out and what it says, doing routine maintenance on equipment, be it boilers, block light changes, that sort of thing. And repair maintenance, of course, where people have faults, things that are not working. There may be lighting, could be heating. There wasn't so much air conditioning around then, there was ventilation, fans, so sometimes kitchen equipment. We used to look at everything. And like I say, the people I worked with were, generally speaking, very good. Always willing to help, always willing to take the time to help me to learn. We also did other training within what was called the power section at BT. There were other sections. There were people that did hot water fitting, pipe fitting. There were people that did iron fighting, which was basically manufacturing racks and putting up ironwork for the telecoms equipment. There was also gas fitting. There were people that did gas fitting, and I spent a short period working with those people. That was just to give me an appreciation of the other activities that went on in the section, really. So just to summarise this slide, 3-year apprenticeship, City and Guilds Electrical Technician Certificate, 5-year course, first 3 years covered in my apprenticeship on block release. BT's vocational training school, where I was taught in workshops how to do electrical installation, how to do electrical faulting, had a look at DC power plant, which powered the telecoms equipment, training in the field, working with people, and appreciation of other activities within the group. And like I say, I felt that was a very comprehensive training scheme. And at the end of the scheme, you then actually had to sit what they called a board. So I had to sit down with 2 managers who'd ask me lots of questions, and then make a decision on whether or not I was qualified to go out on my own as a junior engineer. Obviously they took feedback from the people I've been working with. They asked me questions, they looked at the work I'd been doing, and I'm happy to say that I was quite successful at that. I did quite well at technical college. I did very well on the vocational courses, and the people I worked with seemed happy with me. So come the end of my apprenticeship, there was actually no problem in me passing out as a junior engineer and then letting me loose on my own, which was quite interesting. Although my technical officer training wasn't formally part of my apprenticeship, I thought it was worth covering, as it is really an extension to an apprenticeship. The most senior technical grade within BT at the time was a technical officer, and to qualify as a technical officer you had to complete a 2-year technical officer in training. To qualify to get onto the technical officer in training scheme, you had to work as a junior engineer for normally between 2 and 5 years until you were deemed suitable for that. In my case, this was about 3 years, so this took place probably 6 years into my career, so 3 years after my apprenticeship. Of course, by then I had finished my college training. I had my 5th year City and Guilds, so although I've included it on this slide, that was actually completed before I did my technical officer in training. The main part of my technical officer in training involved actually just working with a technical officer and learning from them teaching me what they did. As before with my apprenticeship, I found that people were very willing to help, providing you were willing to learn. It also involved quite a few vocational courses. Being in central London, of course, lifts were a very big part of what we used to work on, so lift maintenance courses. There was a general lift maintenance course at the BT Training Centre, heating and ventilation courses, building power plant courses. So again, BT had pretty much everything covered. There was also manufacturer training or vocational training, so specialist courses run by predominantly the manufacturers of the equipment. Sometimes that was formal courses, so I clearly remember going to an air conditioning manufacturer for a a week to do a course specifically on their equipment, and sometimes it was a bit more ad hoc. If we had one of their specialists in for the day for faults that we couldn't cover, we'd generally keep them there and get them to teach us what they could about their equipment. So it's sort of a semi-formal training scheme, say lasted 2 years. As with the apprenticeship, you had to show at the end of it that you were being successful, you had to achieve certain standards, and all being well, at the end of it you were deemed to be suitable as a technical officer, as I say, which was BT's senior technical engineering position at the time. I believe that I only did about 18 months as a technical officer in training, and a vacancy became available, and at that point I was actually promoted. So although it was a 2-year training scheme, I guess you could say I was lucky in that I was promoted to technical officer after 18 months. So as I said, not really formal apprenticeship, but certainly a formal training scheme which could be considered an extension to the apprenticeship. The last thing I wanted to do in this presentation was just share a few of my thoughts about apprenticeships. The first thing I would say is that make sure it's a real apprenticeship. What qualifications are you going to come out with at the end of the apprenticeship? Is there going to be any formal vocational training, professional body training? Are there qualifications you're going to be able to use? Is there going to be a job available for you at the end of the apprenticeship, or are you going to have to look for work elsewhere? Are the qualifications that you've got during the apprenticeship going to enable you to get a job elsewhere? So just make sure that you're going to get good training and come out with qualifications that will enable you to further your career, hopefully with the company you've done the training with, but if not, elsewhere in your chosen profession. The second thing there is a question that often gets asked: is an apprenticeship better or worse than either a degree or further education, college? For me, there's absolutely no answer to that question. It all depends on what suits you best. Certainly for me, I was better off doing an apprenticeship. I know many people I went to school with who went on to do degrees and had very successful careers. So certainly no right or wrong answer there. One thing I will say is that if you get an apprenticeship, you don't accumulate student debt, which can be up to £40,000 or £50,000, and you are work ready sooner. The downside of an apprenticeship, of course, is that your career progression may be slower, especially if you're in a larger organisation. You may find that people with degrees are promoted to management, middle management and senior management faster than people without degrees. So it's just things to consider there. Like I say, for me, an apprenticeship was the right way. For other people, definitely wouldn't have been the right way. Only you can make that decision on what's right for you. Last thing I want to say is that apprenticeship is a learning experience. When you start as an apprentice, you're really going to know next to nothing about the job that you're taking on. So what you need to do is look, listen and learn. Just pay attention, and in big red letters there, switch your phone off. The last thing people want is you on your phone all day and not listening to what they're trying to teach you. And true story, I do actually know somebody that sacked an apprentice in the building industry because every time he turned around he said he was on his phone and he just wasn't prepared to put up with it any longer. So switch your phone off, look, listen and learn. And like I've said in both of my apprentice training and my technical officer training, if you're willing to learn, people will be willing to teach you. Lastly, you've got a long career ahead of you. Work hard, enjoy it and have fun. I hope you've found the presentation slightly interesting, and some of the information I've shared with you will be of some use to you. Thank you for listening.